Hi, everyone, and welcome to Words, Images, and Worlds. I am so glad to be talking on this episode with, uh, I'm going to say auteur because you do the authoring, the artistry, all the pieces, and generally, I guess we could say comics creator, Farel Dalrymple. Farel, welcome to the episode. Welcome to the show, and thanks for saying yes to coming on.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, glad to, glad to. I'll mention a couple of titles before we dive into some questions. So, Wrenchies being one of those that is out there. Maybe one of the first things that I discovered of yours. You have Omega, which has a subtitle that
The
escapes me at the
unknown.
moment. The
It's
Unknown.
unknown is
That's
why it's escaping you. So
that's
maybe the
right.
unknown.
That's right. Yeah, very appropriate. Proxima Centauri, and then It Will All Hurt would be a couple of those titles, and you have several more. Too many to name necessarily, but
There's a couple more like Pop Gun War is like the thing I sort of started doing, comics with or
yeah,
publishing with. And
yeah.
there might be another one. I'm kind of blanking on it myself right now, but that's about it, pretty much.
Yeah, and Wrenchies is still one that lives in my mind again, just because I think it was maybe the first thing I'd seen of yours. It's kind of, I was trying to think of a way to describe it, and it speaks to your unique vision that there wasn't just one thing, because I was like, well, it's sort of like if, David Lynch and maybe a little Clive Barker took on the Goonies meets Lord of the Flies, and there are a lot of things at work in there. It's really cool.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, that was definitely like a mashup of a bunch of different, I guess like literary pop culture type stuff that I wanted to do, but it kind of started out as one thing and then turned into something else. And yeah, I worked on that for I guess like as far as just drawing and writing and coloring and all that kind of stuff. I worked on it for about 5 years. It
Oh
was
wow.
it was when I pitched it the first second to when I had a book in my hand, it was 7 years total time. So
Wow.
almost almost a decade, I guess.
Labor of love, a labor of love, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was a labor of obsession. Yeah, that was yeah, it was yeah, it was weird because like that, yeah, it makes sense that that's like the thing a lot of people, I guess, that know my work, that seems to be the thing that is the most, I guess, exposed because it was like when when I like I guess like I said, I pitched the book to for second. It was at a time when I felt like there was a lot of like graphic novels were like cool or something, like that was
Right.
like I think there was a bunch of books that came out from Pantheon around
Hmm.
then, and I when I moved to Portland, I met a literary agent like through a friend, and I was just kind of content on being like an illustrator for whoever, and kind of doing my own comics as like a hobby or something. Like I had an idea that I wanted to be this like you said auteur, but
Yeah.
I didn't have like a plan or anything like that. It was just sort of like, oh, I just make comics, that I try to get published or self-publish. And I met this agent, and she was a really positive person, or is a positive person, and seemed to think like, oh, we can get you a lot of money for this thing. If you have any ideas you want to do, whatever. And I had done a like a short story in a collaborative, like an anthology with a bunch of friends that I had. We basically, since I graduated art school, there's a book called Meat House that we did like I think we did like 9 issues of. And the last volume was pretty big, and it was like full color. All the ones before that were black and white.
Mm.
And yeah, it was like I did like a 15-page story in it about these two kids that go into this like magic elf cave, and they get like changed by it, like this weird thing happens to them, and like supernatural event. And when the agent approached me, I was I was like, okay, well, I do have this idea that I kind of want to expand on, you know.
Hmm.
And that was before I really thought about how I wanted to tie in the Wrenchies, the like the superhero group aspect, and like the
Hmm.
creating a comic book aspect, and I feel like a lot of the ideas, like I said, it's kind of a mashup. So it's like there's not really necessarily anything I did in the Wrenchies that was like super original like by itself, but I like putting these all these things together as I was making it. I kept wanting to add stuff and add stuff, and when I had used this character Hollis in like a few of the issues of Meat House and some other anthologies that I'd worked on, and I kind of got the idea to put him in the story. And
Hmm.
I felt like when I did that, then it really like came together for me. And
Yeah.
I feel like he's kind of like the heart of the book. And yeah, like sort of tied these different ideas that I had together, and I was able to have like kind of like a I don't know, like a thing for like readers to be able to relate to more than just having like, these weird supernatural things. He's just like a normal kid that likes to cosplay and watch TV and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you mentioned originality. I feel like your style uh is so unique. When I see something by you, I know it's yours. So that I think that's part of the vision too. The a variety of stories have existed for some time, but when you get to see something through a unique style or unique perspective, I always appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wish everyone felt like that, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions I wanted to ask was about your positive experiences, the title, because I mentioned Wrenchies, but are there titles or experiences that bubble to the surface for you as being sort of go-to markers in your career so far?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that yeah, that was an interesting question. It's weird like making comic books. It's like, I feel pretty lucky in a way, or like privileged or whatever, that I've been able to, you know, make comics, like that I've been
Mm-hmm.
able to like, fulfill like my vision or whatever. But it, it, it sounds like, I'm like, kind of griping or whatever, but everything that I've done comic book wise has been kind of frustrating.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like it's cool getting to like, oh, I want to tell, but it feels like it's more of like this obsession or something, specifically the Wrenchies. That was, like I said, it was like a long time working on it, and it it there was a lot of hair pulling and frustration. It just uh I guess just getting the work done, like
Mm.
I, I I think one of the things that maybe, might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that you might be responding to as far as like its uniqueness is that it doesn't seem like there's a lot of creators in the past decade or so that do things in an analog way.
Yeah.
It's like, it seems like a lot of digital art that seems to be kind of the standard. And
Mm-hmm.
I did all that with watercolor, ink,
Mm-hmm.
watercolor on paper, and there was some like Photoshop stuff at the end. When I was production stuff, I just kind of had to
Yeah.
a lot of like the lettering and cleaning up the pages and stuff. But I'm not really a big fan of. I mean, I like a lot of digital artwork that I see, but I just for myself, I can't really. It, that would be even more frustrating for me. So there's something really satisfying to me to be able just to put paint on paper, and I think maybe that's why my work might stand out a little more. And I even though like I said like, oh, this is kind of a mashup, there's part of me too that like sort of resists formula. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
want it to feel like it's something that people have seen before. Like I
Mm-hmm.
had a friend that I sent the Wrenchies out to a bunch of people before, like peers, colleagues, whatever, and to look at before it was published. And I had this one friend that I really respect his opinion, and he sent me like a really nice response about it. And I guess when he first started reading it, he was like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm gonna like this." You know? But then I think once he got into the story, and realized like what, kind of more what it was about, that you know, he he really, really enjoyed it, and was like moved by it. I guess that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like I want people to have kind of like a like an emotional reaction to my work.
Mhm.
And yeah, yeah, I was thinking about something too when like we're working on the wrenchies. One of the cool things that came out of it was doing It Will Hurt, and that actually I started working on that while I was working on the wrenchies, because it was like I guess like about, I don't know, like year four or something,
Mhm.
into it.
Mhm.
Uh, my folders of notes and drawings and stuff just kept getting bigger and bigger as I was
Yeah.
trying to wrap up the story. And I was like, oh man, there's no way I'm ever going to get this done. And I even, it's kind of like a meta aspect. The main character in the Wrench is Sherwood. He's creating a comic book, and he's
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this finished. And I started just, there was like a lot of stuff I wanted to do with comics that I couldn't do, because I was trying to tell the story. And, it's like, I want to draw like a chase scene or something.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what I did was I sort of set it in the post-apocalyptic world of the Wrenchies. And I just started drawing like 2 panels a day. Like, in the evening when I was like watching Star Trek or something, I would just like, you know, grab one of these Faber-Castell Pitt pens, and I had like some watercolor paper, and I cut them all into like basically like rectangles. Like I basically cut like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper in half,
Mhm.
and I would just draw 2 panels and just try to do 2 panels a night, and just make it up as I went along. And I had a buddy that was doing a website that, like a porthole that featured web comics. And he asked me if I wanted to do something for it. And I was like, oh, I just kind of started drawing this thing called It Will Hurt, put it on there. And then I was doing it like weekly. I would, do these 2 panels a day. And then like the end of the week, I would color them all with watercolor. And it was really, spontaneous, quick, uh, loose drawings. The style's a little different than the wrenchies. The wrenchies, I used like a brush on a lot of it, and like took my time with the penciling first, and inking it, and then erasing the pencils and coloring it. And but It Will Hurt was really fun for me to work on, because it was just me, just you know getting to do what I wanted to do right then, and have it be put up on the web that week,
Yeah.
and then I could see it and like, oh cool, there's a comic. And then people, it was kind of like back when like I was on Facebook and stuff, and that was a
Mhm.
thing. And people would like write to me like as soon as I put it up, or like, hey, this is cool, and I hadn't really had any kind of feedback on the wrenchies, for like, I was working on the thing for years and didn't have any kind of, any response to it. So like, I don't know if this is good, like what's going on. So that was really nice, good experience I had like doing that strip, and
Mhm.
then later, once after the wrenchies had come out, I was able to put them out as like issues, and then collected it into a trade. So yeah, that was pretty cool. It's like I feel like the wrenchies was like, it's like important, my important graphic novel thing.
Mhm.
But It Will Hurt has like kind of more of like a, like a, it's not quite as oppressive. There's more of like I feel like a sense of joy in it, and just sort of like, loose, fun adventure story.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've had a couple of people come on and mention sort of that creating in a vacuum space that graphic novels require, and it's
Yeah.
extended time. No,
Mhm.
nobody does a graphic novel quickly, I don't think.
Yeah.
So to sort of be in that lonely space and then eventually get to share, I'm sure it's a much different feeling than getting to do like a web comic where you get to share things, get interactions pretty immediately. which
Mhm.
is that's a human thing. That's a helpful thing as an artist to be able to hear from the audience.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm working on a children's book right now with a friend of mine, and I'm not even allowed to share art. I had to sign like an NDA and stuff, so
Oh
I can't
yes,
even
yeah.
like, share artwork of it. And it's like I'm like, and sometimes I'll do like like a little snippet of a panel and put it up like on my Patreon. I'm like, don't show this to anybody, just because I want someone to see what I'm doing. My
Yeah.
my partner is an artist as well, and it's been really nice being able to share the work with her. She's actually helping me on it now, and
Nice, nice.
I feel like that's vital, to me anyway. Like being able to like just keep going, not get like defeated and just feel like I don't even know if this is worthwhile. I'm getting paid for it too, so that's sort of a motivating factor.
Sure.
Whereas
Always,
like
always.
it will all hurt. Like I wasn't, it was just sort of like I'm just doing this to do it. There's like not really any kind of like capitalist aspect to it, which is nice.
Yeah, yeah. I won't ask about details, but I'm curious about how it is working on a picture book because it's such a compressed form versus a graphic novel or a multi-issue comic where you have a little bit more space. And picture books tend to be like you got to do a lot in 20 to 30 pages or whatever it is. So just curious how that's been for you.
Well, that's funny you said. I guess I misspoke. I would say it's more of like an all ages comic
Oh,
book. What it's
cool,
turned
cool.
into, it did start out as a picture book. Like
Yeah.
that was kind of like my idea when his buddy of mine approached me with the idea. It was a story that he told his children, like at bedtime or whatever. He would just kind of
Mhm, mhm.
extemporaneously, make up this tale. And when he talked to me about it, I was thinking like, oh, cool, like like Richard Scarry and Maurice Sendak and that kind of thing. So that's what we were going for, and it's been interesting. He's a comic book writer and works Marvel style with pretty much everyone
Mhm.
that he collaborates with. And he's an artist too. He's drawn comics before, so he understands. I guess the amount of work it takes to to make to draw. It's like the drawing aspect is way more labor intensive than the writing aspect. But
Yeah.
he's still a writer, and so I think he got he would tell me like scenes basically like here's the characters, here's the scene, draw the scene, and then at some point, just from back and forth, it just started turning into a comic. It's like
Nice.
that's what he knows, that's what I know. So I've been trying to keep it like, hey, can we do like 2 panel pages or 3 panel pages? And there's some 4 panel pages, but we're trying to keep the panels sort of limited, and then have like splash pages every once in a while. And right now I'm on like page 100.
Nice.
So it's kind
Nice.
of grown into sort of like a graphic novel, so that's like the term we're using now is like an all ages book, uh,
Yeah, I love that.
graphic novel. I don't think we're going to do it as like issues or anything. I think it's just kind of, we're just going to release it as like, I'm guessing it's going to be at this. I still haven't gotten like the script, so, so I'm guessing it's going to be around 150 pages, once it's all done, which
Nice.
is a little
Nice.
big for a kid's book, I guess, but hopefully it'll be fun for adults to look at it and read it and stuff too.
Yeah, yeah. I love a nice flexible book. I've worked with kids, young kids, older kids, adult kids. And it's nice to have a book that sort of fits all ages and that's truly all ages. So I'm excited to see that when it's out and ready to talk about more.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. I'm excited for it to be out too.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned watercolor. Is that sort of your go-to medium, or do you have other things that you like to play with artistically?
Yeah, that's pretty much my main way of coloring something, I guess. I went to art school. I studied oil painting. I
Hmm.
never really studied watercolor. I think I might have taken like a class, like a summer class or something, or sat in with a watercolor class occasionally. But I'm mostly just kind of self-taught in the sense I just sort of, it seemed like a way to do comics fast, color comics
Yeah.
fast. Like I didn't really, sitting in front of a computer just like hurts my neck. Like I don't
Hmm.
I start to get really, I have like a Wacom tablet and I do some Photoshop colors. I've done it, with like Proxima Centauri was a lot more mixed media.
Hmm. Hmm.
There was like I think one issue, like issue 5, I did entirely Photoshop color. I still inked it with a pen, but that was and that actually ended up being my favorite chapter in the book. Like the way that looked the most. But uh, yeah, yeah, I would say watercolor. It was just it came about. It wasn't like a plan. It was just sort of like I want to color stuff, and this seems like the fastest way I can do it.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's like with It Will Hurt, I was afraid I would get too just bogged down with like zooming in and trying to get everything.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and I enjoy it. I enjoyed the way it looks. Like there's some children's book illustrators that I liked the way they cut. Like Lisbeth Zwerger was a big
Hmm.
influence
Hmm.
on me. I think when I saw that there's an Oscar Wilde story that she illustrated called The Selfish Giant that like really knocked my socks off, and I was like, I want to make comics that look like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, there's some other people that I'm kind of blanking on, but yeah, it kind of seemed to lend itself to my style too, and it just feels good to do.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. And it's very visually striking. And I mean, I imagine I've not used watercolor, but I imagine there's a nice like blending that can happen, and sort of playfulness with it too.
Well, that's the thing is like, yeah, playfulness. I feel like the like oil painting or there's a lot of like pushing and pulling and stuff, but like with watercolor, for me, I felt like I could be kind of loose with it and sort of like
Hmm.
I don't have
Hmm.
to color all inside the lines. I could just lay some washes down really quick, and like that looks fine as is. I don't have to like fuss with it too much. A lot of times I do end up like, getting in there and like using some gouache or something or some opaque white or, and try to, make it look a little cleaner but initially it was just kind of like, oh, cool. I can just, splatter some paint down and then I'm done, and I
Hmm.
can move on to
Hmm.
the next page. And so, yeah, it was like the loose sort of like, yeah, like you said, playful quality that appealed to me as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Now I haven't asked you the origins question, which was kind of the first question, which is, what is it about comics? What kind of attracted you to comics early on to say, yes, this is the place for me to practice my art and storytelling?
It was yeah, that just came out of me being a little kid that I was a Marvel kid.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
loved Spider-Man and Daredevil and all that X-Men and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I was into DC as much. It was like there was something about like the I guess maybe I wasn't thinking about this at the time, but there was something about like the like humanity of those excuse me, of the Marvel characters
Yeah.
that I liked. Like Peter Parker was like neurotic, always worried about stuff and I really liked seeing when like he would just use his Spider-Man powers in like normal clothes or something.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Or like I remember reading like there was like a Nick Fury Agent of Shield miniseries that I thought was really cool, and that had some like
Hmm.
there was like a Jim Steranko cover and like a Kevin Nolan cover. They had different cover artists paint the covers, and yeah, that I really liked that story. He's like, oh, cool, it's just like secret agents and stuff. So I would just
Yeah.
make my own comics up based off those ideas. Like I loved like ninjas and things. So I would just like have these like adventure stories that I would just draw in like spiral notebooks,
Yeah.
and I wasn't really thinking about anything other than maybe showing a couple of my friends the thing, but I was just doing it to do it. And I
Hmm.
wasn't, I'm gonna be a cartoon, I'm gonna be a comic book artist. It wasn't anything like that. It was, I also like, Sunday strips or like daily newspaper
Hmm.
comic strips. And so I kind of had this idea that was like, oh, I'm gonna be like a, Charles Schultz type person. I'm
Yeah.
gonna do like a
Yeah.
comic strip. And then at some point, an older friend of mine mentioned, he's like, that stuff's more about like the writing, like you really need to be like funny and write them, like these smart kind of gags or whatever. I forgot the way he
Hmm.
put it, but it kind of got me thinking. He's like, the art's not as important, which I don't necessarily agree with now.
Yeah,
But at
yeah,
the time I was like, oh yeah, you know, I probably really don't really, I'm not really, I wouldn't really be good at doing something like Garfield or whatever, even though like I
hmm,
loved Garfield and, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't really until like I saw Calvin and Hobbes that I was just like, oh wow, okay, that,
yeah,
art
totally.
writing is kind of like one thing. It's not like a separate deal. But I think like when I was a teenager or something, I was kind of thinking more of like, oh yeah, maybe I should try to do like Marvel comics or something, and the whole
Hmm.
time I was doing this, I was still drawing my own stories, like pretty much what I do now, but like, a 14-year-old version of that, or 13 or 12-year-old or 16-year-old version of that, and a lot of the stuff too was like, pretty silly. Like I would just have pages in my sketchbook of like guys in superhero outfits, and you're like, this, they all have like similar uniforms, or like, like a
Yeah.
different version of like Power Pack or X-Men or something. I just My mom just moved recently, and she's kind of like a hoarder person.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was going through a lot of her stuff trying to get rid of, things, and I just found like a bunch of like sketchbooks and
Love it.
things that I filled up with like these comics, and it was like, it's really embarrassing, but it was kind of hilarious too. Just like looking at all these drawings, I'm like, oh man, I was just like copying different Marvel comics that I liked,
Oh
like
yeah.
doing my version of it. Um, yeah, I think even when I was like around 16 or 17, I was like, uh, you know, considering what I wanted to do post high school, I I called up the Jim Steranko, not Jim Steranko. What am I thinking of? Joe Kubert, the Joe Kubert Art School in New Jersey.
Hmm.
There, I
Hmm.
saw like an ad in a Marvel comic that was like, draw comic books, like learn how to do this thing, be a penciler or inker or whatever. So I just called them up for their, information to, you know,
Yeah.
and I never really followed up with it, which I'm kind of, glad I didn't. But I not to criticize that school or anyone that, went there. I just, think for what I wanted to do, it maybe wasn't the right, I'm happy about like the path my life took, even though like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
waited, I dropped out of high school. I ended up dropping out of high school. I went I was just like working at like a warehouse, like packing books up and stuff. And then I started going, to a community college. And
Yeah.
when I went to this community college, about when I was going to get like an associate's degree, I think I spent like about 3 years of community college stuff to get a 2-year degree. Um, a I don't even know what you call it, an agent or liaison or whatever from School of Visual Arts came to our school
Hmm.
and showed us work that the students were doing there. And I was like, whoa, that is really intimidating. The stuff that those seniors are doing. I want to be able to do that, So I applied to Kansas City Art Institute and SVA. And then I went and visited New York, and then I was like, oh, I want to go there just because it was like, oh, cool, big city. This is exciting.
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and then there I studied like how to be an illustrator. I took like oil painting classes, and I didn't even take like a computer class, which is hilarious to me, now. It's like I really could have used that. They were actually teaching. It was kind of like early Photoshop days. They had some classes
Hmm.
available and stuff, but um, I just, yeah, I was studying. I had all these illustration classes and stuff like that. But one of the reasons I wanted to go there too was that there was a class called cartooning for illustrators, and it was
Mm.
taught by Walter Simonson,
Oh
who I
wow.
was like loved his work from Thor. Like his run on Thor was just like, it's like, this is one of my favorite artists, and he did like X Factor with his wife Louise. And yeah, I was like, oh, I gotta take this class. And so it was funny like being in his class because I was still this whole time, like even at SVA when I was like, doing, I didn't really hang out with like the cartooning majors as much. There was like, it seemed like a lot of the people that took those classes that were in the cartooning program were more like, DC, Marvel kind of, superhero comics. And I think at that point, I was kind of more into like, oh, I'm a little more edgy. I want to do like Vertigo book or something like that. Even though I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really
Hmm.
read a lot of that stuff, I just kind of had this idea in my head, like, oh, I'm gonna, I wasn't really exposed to like indie comics or anything at that point.
Yeah.
So I was like in Walt Simonson's class, and I was drawing my, everyone else in class. It seemed like, oh, we're doing Spider-Man pages or Batman pages or whatever, and I was drawing this comic that I ended up self-publishing called Smith's Adventures in the Super Mundane. It was like a 40-page book that I did half of it in Walt Simonson's class, and then my senior year, I did the other half of it with this teacher named Keith Mayerson, who's kind of more of like a fine artist, but he'd done like a
Mm.
graphic novel, and he had both those guys were like are brilliant with just telling stories sequentially.
Hmm.
Like Walt's
Hmm.
kind of coming more of like the superhero angle, and Keith kind of more had this sort of indie comics fine art angle. But I got really great feedback from both those guys, and even
Nice.
though like it wasn't really Walt's jam, he was like, "Okay, this is your stuff's a little cryptic," and but I would go to him and be like, "What do you think I should do? You know, for this page? Like I'm trying to figure out how to tell this part," and he's like, "Oh, well." Have you considered doing this or this? And I was like, oh
Nice.
yeah, great.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, and then I ended up finishing the book kind of like, right before I graduated. And there was a couple of guys at school, uh, Dave Roman and John Green, who did a book
Mhm.
called I think it's Quick and Forbidden.
Yeah. Yeah. They've
And
both
they
been on the show too. Yeah.
oh, okay, great. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
good guys. They they helped me out a lot with excuse me, with publishing Smiths. And so they were they told me after I got my book out. I think I did like two versions of it. I did like the small press co-op version, and then I had a friend that had like a printer owed him a favor, so we ended up printing it with like a color cover and stuff on like nicer paper. But they mentioned to me that they're like, oh, we're going to this show, this like new show called the Small Press Expo,
Nice. Yeah.
SPX, and in Bethesda, Maryland. And I didn't even know what. I mean, I'd been to like San Diego Comic Con a couple times as a teenager, but I didn't really understand what indie comics were. Like, I mean, I knew they existed. Like, I read some of them, but it wasn't like I didn't realize when I got there. It was like, oh, this is like a subculture. This is
Hmm.
like a
Hmm.
scene. And so like
Hmm.
I just had I heard like a quote. I mentioned this a bunch of times in my life, but a few years before that, I had seen Ray Bradbury talk at like a public
Oh,
library.
love Ray Bradbury. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. Uh, and he said, "Have proof of your excellence to show your friends." And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to publish. Just like oh, I want to be able to give this to people, as like a business card or whatever. Like I made this, and it was cool. Like going to that show with actual book. I didn't have like a table. Wasn't tabling or anything, but I just went to walked around. I was kind of like shy, but like if I saw something that appealed to me, I'd just be like, oh hey, can I give you my comic book?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and I didn't realize that was like a whole deal. Like, hey, let's trade. So I wasn't really asking to trade with anybody, but there was a couple people that I would give them my comic book, and then they would be like, oh, here's my comic book. And it was really neat too, like seeing people like, you made this is great, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
cool, I'm like in a club now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so that was like, I don't know, that was like a really big deal to me going to that, and then I've gone to a bunch of those shows since then. And I remember at that first show, it was really neat. There was like some buddies, Dave and John that I went up to and gave my comic to, and then I just walked away from their table, and then someone chased me down. It was Jordan Crane, who I'm like a huge fan of his work. he was like, "Hey, can I get one of those?" I was like,
Nice.
"Sure, why not?" And then I looked at his work. I'm like, "Oh, this guy's great."
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. It was really fun and a cool, positive experience. That I felt like too was kind of like a magical time. At least for me, it was where it's like I've gone back to several SPXs since then, and now it's just like it's such a different animal now than what it was. Like a different kind of thing. And it's not like bad or anything now. It's just like it's like hard to get like a table at one of those
Yeah.
shows for
Yeah. More
it's like
exclusive. Yeah.
yeah, and I think for years there was like for years I would go to those shows and kind of like embarrass myself, like getting I don't like drink or anything now, but I would like be like drinking beer, at the table.
Right, right.
It's like me and my meat house buddies. We had like the one year we all went as like a group. We had like a pyramid on our book table. It's probably like scaring away people and stuff, or maybe attracting certain types of people, but they
True,
were really
true.
fun because like I met so many people that I'm like lifelong friends with, now. So
Need to cut you off. Was there anything about the show that you were talking about that you'd like to wrap up with on that part?
I mean, there's like a lot of stuff I feel like I could probably go into, but yeah, maybe we'll leave that for next time if there's a next time.
There will definitely be a next time. I'd be glad to have you on anytime. So yeah, the last couple of questions I tend to ask usually focus on places where people can connect with you, websites, social media things, upcoming events, and then I know you have a book that's under NDA, but anything that's recent or upcoming that you'd like to share about, and then we can hit anything that I might have missed.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess the biggest thing that I've been doing, like personal work wise, is a series that I've been working on for a few years now. I basically started on it when I was doing Proxima Centauri, and yeah, it's called Robot Todd, and he's like a character that I've used in a bunch of. He actually in It Will Hurt is his like first appearance, and I just like even though he wasn't like super prominent in that, I guess he had like a kind of a big role, especially towards the end, but. uh I just kind of was like playing with it. It's like I should do a series about him, and so I did a cover like I don't know when it was like 2017 or something, and or I just penciled it. I didn't even like ink it or color it at that point. But then I just started maybe like 2 years ago. I just was like, I gotta start in this comic, and I started trying to do like a page a week, which isn't anything. It's going to take me forever to still, to get like 5 issues in the can. It's like I have a plan for like a 5 issue series. So I used to be really, into Instagram, and
Hmm.
I'm never much of a Twitter person, but I still have an Instagram, and I still have Twitter, and I mean that place is such a weird, like kind of gross
Definitely.
place. But I never like had like a ton of followers on that thing, but I I got like a invite to do the Blue Sky thing, so I'm trying that out. But I'm barely on any of those things anymore. Like Instagram, I've kind of I post occasionally, but the thing is like from doing these Robot Todd pages, I got the idea of just and it was because I have a Patreon. I don't want to
Hmm.
sound like a capitalist and just be like, "Hey, join my Patreon." But I started, thinking like trying to think of like content I could do strictly for Patreon, and I was like, "Well, I'll do these. I'll start posting these Robot Todd pages on Patreon."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was kind of before Patreon, where you were able to do video on the app.
Hmm.
I had like a YouTube channel that I would post stuff, kind of occasionally, but I started um, doing like time lapse things of me working on the pages of
Nice, nice.
Robot Todd. So they're all up. I mean, basically every page of Robot Todd, there's a time lapse of with me like doing a voiceover too on YouTube that you can just watch for free. You know,
Awesome.
and then the Patreon I have Farel Dow. I think it's Farel Dow on pretty much all the stuff. Um, uh, it, like I'll expound a little more on it on my Patreon. Like I can go into more detail about process and stuff that I'm into, like books that I've read and that kind of thing.
Very cool.
But
Very
yeah, the
cool.
YouTube, if you're just kind of like want to check out my work, I'd say that's probably like go to my YouTube channel and you can watch me work on a thing. I'll post like the finished page at the end and
Yeah.
you know.
That's cool. That's cool. I love the open access of YouTube, which is why this is on YouTube. And I love the open access of things like Spotify for the audio. I spent time writing as an academic, and it's weird. And I still write as an academic, but you write these things that you spend a long amount of time on, and then you publish them, and then like they're under some lock and key, like you have to pay so much money, or somebody has to subscribe, or like a school has to subscribe. So it's nice to be able to share things that are like open access. So that's very cool. I'm also a wannabe comics artist or something like that. So I'm gonna definitely check out your time lapse videos. I'm curious.
Cool. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll check out this podcast on YouTube too. That's great because we're
Yeah,
both
yeah.
on there.
Yeah, I
It'd be
try to
fun.
share the things. I try to share the things. Um, so yeah, any let's see, have we covered projects, upcoming events, anything like that that we want to make sure to mention?
Oh yeah. So there's a show here in Portland, Oregon, where I live, at the Lloyd Center Mall, and it's like I think it's like an ongoing show that is based out of Los Angeles by Keenan Marshall Keller, I think his name is. I might be getting one of those names wrong, but it's called Permanent Damage, and that's in August, sometime in August. So I think there's like the Instagram thing links to it or whatever.
Nice.
Um, and then the next month, at the end of September, I'll be in Boise, Idaho for there's a library Comic Con type thing, and I've done that show several times. It's really neat. It's I guess this year they're doing something different. They did this last year. I didn't go last year, but I've gone to like six of them or something. But this year they're doing one of the days at the zoo. Like
Nice.
it's funny. Me and my buddy Simon Roy is like a great cartoonist. He did the work. He did some work on Prophet, or he created Prophet,
Hmm. Hmm.
the newer version of that. Not old Rob Liefeld Prophet, but even though it was like a Rob Liefeld joint, it was like a completely new thing. He Me and him went to this Boise Comic Con a couple times, and the showrunner Josh, he was like, "Is there anything you guys want to do?" And I was just like, "Let's go to the zoo. You guys have a zoo here." And he's like, "Okay." It was like a few blocks from where they were having the show at, and then it seemed like we went like 2 years in a row, and then it seemed like it just kind of became a thing that people did.
Yeah,
That there's
yeah.
the show that would go to the zoo, and it's just kind of funny now. It's like, oh yeah, we're having the show at the zoo now. So they have like I think one day of like panels and what do you call it? It's like a panel, like workshops. There you go, panels and
Nice.
workshops and stuff. And then I think the next day they're having like where people table and sell their books and stuff at the zoo. So
Love it.
it should
Love it.
be fun if you're in the Boise, Idaho area. Come on by.
Yeah, that sounds really cool, really cool. And I mean the 12 Monkeys Day of the workshop sounds fun too. That's interesting. All right. Did we miss anything in the talk that you want to make sure to share about? I try to be comprehensive. It's a short show.
Yeah, and I don't think so. It seemed like a pretty good. I don't know. My mind goes blank doing these types of things. So I
Uh,
think yeah, I feel pretty satisfied as far as like talking wise. So
Great, great. Well, we'll always always glad to have you back on. Always glad to add in additional details. And yeah, thanks so much for taking some time to stop by the Zoom space here and also log back in and talk with me.
great, cool, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.